I may seem like an embarrassment with this big globalist talk, since I don't even have any audience. But I feel an obligation, even if I have to talk into a wall, to say what I have to say. I'm not putting out a speech every day, every week, every month, or every year. I'm not trying to waste anyone's time. We all want something very simple: peace and happiness. The question is, do we want it only for ourselves? And if so, it's not going to happen. We may be discouraged from getting involved in politics, since the term is instantly associated with sleaziness, hypocrisy, dishonesty. It's an asylum for the insane. But politics is involved in our lives, whether we like it or not. For example, ever since this conflict in Ukraine started, my mother is literally angry at me because I'm not angry enough at Russia. I do not hate Putin enough. According to her, it's because I'm ignorant. I need to be educated. Even though I've been paying very close attention to politics all my life, always listening to different sides of the story, and not just different news sides, but doing my own research. There's no way I'm ignorant when it comes to politics. And this is not about Ukraine. We have all kinds of different personal problems: health, financial, stress, anxiety, relationship, depression, whatever. Problems which are often next to impossible or impossible to solve, or they keep reoccurring, if we're not the ones ultimately causing these problems. We can blame ourselves, each other, all we want. But if we analyze it thoroughly, more often than we realize, the ultimate cause for a lot of these problems really stems from the same incompetence of global political system. This is not looking for a scapegoat. I'll be getting into details. And so a lot of times trying to solve these problems on our own, individually, which are really problems of the entire society, trying to act like responsible adults, is childish. It's sort of like trying to cure a part of the body, like an arm or a leg, that being us individually, rather than entire body, that being the entire society. From a virus, it's not going to work. Like the virus, these problems will keep streaming back. But if we can put in a little bit of effort to see beyond ourselves, beyond our own misery, beyond flaws of society, flaws of others, look at the entire picture and unite for this common cause to eliminate political incompetence, then we can solve most of our own problems and create an amazing new world. As I'll be addressing, it's not difficult at all, as long as we do not get derailed and manipulated. All you have to do is get everybody you know to send me $10 and subscribe to my channel so I can keep educating you. That was a joke. But essentially, that's what pretty much everyone in politics will try to imply, that you should subscribe to their channel so they can keep educating you in between the commercials. And then after you start to feel guilty enough, if you really want to make things happen, you can find a link somewhere in their content to one of the affiliated groups and make a little contribution. Or give big if you want to be better than the average sheep. And to be more appealing to their audience, they will often act like their voice is oppressed. They need your help to get the message out. But the question that number one, oppressed networks such as Fox News, and I'm only bringing up Fox News because I believe this is the network that stole most of my audience. You can laugh if you want, but just listen. The question that number one, oppressed networks such as Fox News, with hundreds of millions of viewers, fails to address is, how did their Make America Great Again movement, a movement which already took the nation by storm, turn into ultimate victory for Joe Biden? So then that means that majority of Americans now hate America. We are living in a nation overrun by freaking idiots. Or if election was stolen, and I do believe it was stolen, I just don't think it was stolen from Trump. That's the entire point of this message. We'll get back to that. If election was stolen from Trump, then how did this awesome leader with all his military support, which he kept bragging about, and the backing of majority of Americans, failed to do anything about it in his home of the brave and the land of the cheated. Some say, well, the swamp was bigger than he expected. Really? But he was so smart, he had such power, ordering bombing raids in other nations to fight the bad guys. Like, for example, ordering strikes in Syria while eating the most beautiful piece of chocolate cake, as he put it. Dropping the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan, assassinating Iranian general. And yet couldn't do anything about election that was stolen from right under his nose? So how smart was he? Is that a fighter? And we can understand that for people on television, this political circus is like a ball game. Logic doesn't matter. It's all about left, right, left, right. But for the rest of us, for the love of our country and the world, let's be real. And so what if he's allowed to play president again in 2024? He's a proven pushover. So in 2028, they're just going to have another liberal in their seesaw circus. And if you watch the other side of their hate-mongering propaganda machine, the CNN and the like, representing the oppressed minorities as they claim. In 2016, Americans elected a white supremacist. Such evil Americans. Either way, while we the people keep getting banned on social media, often for absolutely no reason, simply when we reach a certain level of recognition, their own trusted actors, made members, so to speak, establishment media which has access to White House briefings, keeps inciting this hatred and division. This is an orchestrated effort by globalists who are otherwise absolutely, totally weak. They rule over us, not because they have some sophisticated weapons or because they're brave, but by deceiving us with a partial truth. For example, Donald Trump did make a very good point after losing elections. How could Joe Biden have won elections when he couldn't even fill a toilet of supporters? Maybe he's a president of cyberspace of America. And if pandemic was an excuse, well, neither could Hillary Clinton before pandemic, who supposedly also got almost as many votes as Donald Trump. If we love our country, we should get to the bottom of it. And he had 4 years. Now, generally, if someone is a fighter and he feels he has a nation behind him, my friend, he is not going to allow majority of his people be cheated of election. Absolutely no way. The only logical explanation is that just because Donald Trump filled arenas of supporters does not mean that he had majority of Americans behind him himself. There are many artists who fill stadiums of supporters in every city, which is a much larger venue than arena. People who pay money to see those performers. Supporters who also perhaps would rather see their favorite artist as a president rather than some billionaire apprentice or televised politician. However, even 60,000 fans in a stadium in a city of 6 million is still only 1% of population, not a majority. So if Donald Trump's side is claiming that the media lied about how many votes Joe Biden got, we should allow a possibility that both sides lied. That Trump himself was not nearly as popular as the media made him out to be. And it wasn't exactly the word of mouth that made him popular. Back in 2015-16, I couldn't even see my own friends' posts on Facebook because of all his advertisements. All the while, me and other activists kept having our posts blocked for minor infractions. He was all over television acting like he's so smart he gets media to advertise him for free. He's got them living in their heads rent-free. Remember, establishment does not control opposition. By introducing someone like CNN did with Donald Trump, by announcing for the entire nation that tomorrow Donald Trump will let us know if he's running for president. Stay tuned. This is exactly how CNN reported it. And then the next day, yes, we have breaking news. Donald Trump just announced he's running for president. Oh no, but he's an outsider. He's going to put us out of business. He's going to drain the swamp. Watch out, America. No. Establishment controls opposition by blocking us from the start. Not at the end of performance, like they did with this circus clown. They might as well have had someone like George Soros or Bill Gates tell us about how Clintons are crooked, we need to put them in jail. And how after years of dealing with them, doing business with them, He finally realized how evil liberals are and now wants to save America from them, drain the swamp. And out of desperation, as long as they keep telling us about how America is wonderful, many people would support him. He could get 1% of population to attend his rallies. But 1% in a city of 2 million is already 20,000 people. That would fill an arena, as our beloved Donald Trump did. You may not like this factual truth, but if you love your country, as I believe I do, I suggest you keep listening. Because even I myself may very well be one of those hypocrites simply seeking prestige, trying to become a hero. You decide after listening to this entire mess, but it's really very simple. Either these presidential candidates, who always act or claim like they want to take on the existing corrupt establishment, either they can get people to willingly share their message, without any paid advertisements, without going on establishment media debates to get exposure, where only selected candidates are allowed, where often candidates who cannot even fill a toilet of supporters are allowed, just so they can deny access to candidates who have much larger following, but happen to be a threat to the establishment. Either they can, or they cannot. And if they cannot, their only chance at being famous is to grab this invitation to showcase on this corrupt establishment media, to ride their wave, giving this corrupt establishment media continued credibility in return to continue manipulating us, because they know that without their exposure, without their assistance, they're nothing. They're just like every other candidate. And to be more appealing to society, they're often presented as outsiders. Donald Trump was not the only outsider. Obama was also an outsider from Kenya. Missing flag pin, missing birth certificate. Where the hell he come from? McMaverick or Bush was an outsider. All the way from Texas, who's gonna shake up Washington, no more nation building, focus on America. Pretty much his exact words back in 2000. Clinton also was an outsider. A governor from Arkansas, but ordinary man just like us. Smoked weed, played saxophone, loved women. Even Reagan was an outsider. An actor from Hollywood, not a politician. They were all outsiders. But where would all these outsiders have been if it was not for constant publicity on the insider establishment media, which is controlled by money, by the same people that never change with any elections? If this insider establishment media would have chosen to completely disregard them, like they often disregard other, even very famous people they find uncomfortable to talk about, instead finding time to talk about some kitten stuck down the drain somewhere, where would they have been? So let's imagine for a moment that none of these political big shots exist. That it's entirely up to us to save our loved ones who are in our communities, which is in this country, which is in this world. And I swear on my life, on everything that I own, I have absolutely no interest, no intention of becoming an American president. I believe no intelligent adult could ever want to be an American president because America's problems cannot be solved by America since they're being initiated by globalists. And just like with Mafia, the 5 families, before the RICO Act, if we just go after a thug who broke our windows or a politician who stole our paycheck, there's unlimited supply of these criminals, and they can be replaced the next day. They can have new congressmen, new senators for us every day. Won't make a difference. To get rid of this crime syndicate, of our problems once and for all, we must grab the snake by its head. That's why I formed newworldgovernment.net. Let us imagine for a moment that, as I said, none of these political big shots exist, and that we are the leaders. We are the only hope for our people. It is entirely up to us to save our nation. What can we actually do? I'll get to all the details right here in this speech, but in as few words as possible. We need to have against vote option in all elections. Other way, our freedom of speech, which is what's supposed to make our country and the world great, is absolutely useless. And we cannot blame others for being ignorant if we ourselves do nothing. believing that we cannot do anything because society is too ignorant, then we ourselves are the ones who are absolutely no less ignorant than the most ignorant person on this planet. You do not need to worry about ignorance of others, of society. All you need to be concerned about is what is needed from you. Just listen. Since establishments, trolls, and minority of their brainwashed sheep will unite, basically against us, we must also unite, just not behind some televised celebrity, or supposedly hated by television celebrity like they will, making some empty divisive promises which can only unite a portion of society. Whether it's a free wall paid for by Mexico, free housing for people who cannot build houses themselves, to help the black community, to save the white Christmas, whatever. But only to fix our broken election system and restore freedom of speech. That's it. Only then will the people be able to elect true representatives in sweeping elections who will be able to keep their campaign promises instead of blaming each other for their failures. And if these brainwashed sheep who supported televised circus will try to intimidate you, to call you radical or something, remind them, what happened to their first Bush's Read My Lips No New Taxes back in the 90s? What happened to second Bush's No Nation building all over the Middle East? What happened to Obama's Obamacare or his peace promises? What happened to Donald Trump's making America great, making another liberal American president again? Nothing happened and nothing will ever happen with their televised circus. It's a merry-go-round. Reminder, any elections that do not have either the against vote option or a clear overall majority of entire population voting for a winning candidate are an absolute joke. The only thing that makes such elections seem legitimate is all the hype on establishment's money-dependent pretend to be independent mass media, making statements such as the president this, the president that, president is stupid for ending war in Afghanistan after only 20 years, president wants to help the rich by reducing the taxes, president's approval rating is at an all-time low of just 51%, when it may be more like 10%. I'm not talking about just these latest American elections, this is a global pandemic. To demonstrate my point, allow me to introduce myself. I am the President of the United States of the world. NewWorldGovernment.net. Check it out. Do not confuse it with elitist New World Order, which is a fraud. I've been elected fairly by my buddies, well, my chickens for now, so what? But the elections were well publicized to the best of my ability. I even put some corn in the ballot box, and every time chickens stepped on the ballot box to eat some of that corn, they voted for me. No one voted against me. We didn't even need against vote option. What for? If anyone didn't like me, if anyone wanted to vote against me, they could have voted for my dogs. My dogs, they like my opposition, always barking at me when they get excited, when they want to play. And all the wild birds around here who did not vote, who acted like elections were legitimate, they're just ignorant. Conspiracy theorists. Maybe when it comes to their politics, I'm a nobody. A crank. But having had my mother imprisoned, my father imprisoned for expressing political views when I was a child in Soviet Union, getting into all the fights because teachers there would call me an American imperialist in front of the class, only to come to the United States as a political refugee with absolutely nothing, having to put up with all this bullying here due to political propaganda on establishment media telling everyone how Russians are the enemy. Back in the 80s, just like they're still doing it today, 40 years later. Stops for a while and then it continues again. Russian collusion, Russians stealing our elections, Russians interfering with our neighbors in Ukraine, whatever. Constant fighting, suspensions at school here as a direct result of this political hate-mongering. And later on in life, after I finally dropped out of high school, another form of bullying. Even today as a business owner, having to put up with all kinds of ridiculously obvious mafia-style extortion scams, which they call regulations or whatever. Having been arrested from my own house for robbery back in 2000 after a drug addict tried to rob me. Having to spend 3 nights in jail for what they called wrongful arrest. And I understand that as a white man, I'm not the only one. I'm speaking on behalf of all nationalities, all races. The Asians who supposedly brought us the China virus, Islamofascists who want to kill us all, African Americans who do not want to work, illegal Mexicans who keep stealing our jobs, everyone. And I'm getting to the point. The point is that having to put up with all this nonsense, I had a very valid reason to want to seek a real political change which these politicians on television keep talking about, that would actually put an end to all the wars, human trafficking, degradation of humanity, corruption, laziness, poverty, all these evil things, which all go hand in hand. Laziness and crime, for example, is very understandable with all these corrupt politicians at highest levels as our role models, giving interviews. It always seemed to me that these are very simple problems to solve if you're in charge. But unfortunately, after more than 20 years of trying, and all my passion, I still have absolutely no following. It's amazing because all these people telling us about how government is evil somehow have following. Many of them have massive following. Look at CNN, look at Fox News taking turns demonizing the president, depending on who's president. Adults who never left their mother's basement showing us how to put on shoes have following. Men showing their titties have following. I have none. Humanity must be retarded. Maybe I must be retarded, I just don't realize it. I don't think so. Although, yes, there are many ignorant people in society, and it's almost like you have to be an idiot in order to be allowed on television. I still believe not so much because humanity is ignorant, but because I have been systematically banned from every single political forum on cyberspace over the last more than 20 years, quarter of a century. And of course, every time I got banned, I lost all my online friends and followers. It's back to zero. Whenever I made a video that would start to go viral, on YouTube or whatever, instead of getting picked up by the establishment media, like it often pushes some new artists or whatever, Mob Wives, Sopranos, New Season, Trump, whatever, shoving them down our throats every 5 seconds, whether we want to see it or not, my video would just get banned, including on Facebook and everything else. I didn't even have means to communicate with my mother. For a year and a half under my real name, I had to use some fake name. Until I figured out that I can just change my name. Still lost all my followers, and I had the limit there. I do not have a criminal record. I never preached hatred. But until I stopped posting anything and everything about politics, I kept getting banned and replaced by imposters who promise one thing to the voters and then come up with some ridiculous excuses to do something completely different. Like Joe Biden, Obama, who was even awarded a peace medal for talking about peace, for openly promising to meet with other world leaders of countries like Libya, Syria, hostile or not, to work things out if there's any problems instead of just bombing people there. Under some newly created excuses, as he did, without meeting those leaders like he promised to the voters, creating more refugee crisis. As a former political refugee, who actually has been separated from my parents in the past, I had a reason to be concerned, not just to talk to get my ass elected for prestige. And as a person who actually lived in North Philadelphia ghetto for 15 or 20 years, I did not need to talk tough about illegal criminal gangs like Donald Trump did. Gangs who may think that they're tough because they have their tattoos, their piercings, and somebody supplies them with weapons. But I can assure you that anyone who had to actually put up with these illegal criminal gangs, if we had power, we would ensure that not only these illegal criminal gangs are taken care of, but anyone on the establishment media defending them is taken care of. We'd show them freedom of speech. And if they don't switch, they would have a chance, but if they don't switch their lines quickly enough, it's not going to be in a pleasant way. Unlike with their own made members, or outsiders as they call themselves, like Donald Trump, who was introduced as a presidential candidate on all major networks, including his supposed nemesis CNN, a day before he himself even announced that he's running for president. who not only intentionally or unintentionally failed to drain the swamp and prosecute people like Clinton's as he promised to the voters, but actually called Clintons good people. I don't want to hurt them, after getting elected when it was actually time to do it, while continuing to insult other less prominent Democrats to appear tough, like he's staying the course. And while Clintons were not prosecuted under Trump, perhaps Trump suddenly had a change of heart. Forgive and forget, focus on economy. Okay, that's how we got Joe Biden now. But it's also worth mentioning that the person who initially exposed those Hillary Clinton's emails, Julian Assange, whose work Trump plagiarized to appeal to the voters, that man, for the most of the 4 years under Trump administration, has been prosecuted and chased around by U.S. authorities, having to hide behind walls, practically in prison instead of Clinton's. So with all due respect, either this national hero, Donald Trump, was an absolute powerless puppet or an absolute scum. Just not for the reasons CNN has been telling us. Wanting to help Americans, insulting our special reporters, holding massive rallies, not showing us his tax returns, meeting with other world leaders. Not for that. And all this banning of Trump from Facebook and Twitter and the impeachment again, the last week of his so-called presidency, was all part of this very same mafia-style circus act to control opposition. Our oppressors know that if they do not lead their own opposition, if they do not constantly introduce imposters, if they do not constantly supply society with bandwagons of so-called outsiders for people to jump on, to join so that they can be derailed on, incriminated on, turned into a joke on, then people will unite behind something which they cannot control, and their entire weakling political mafia, which is a minority but still with millions of its welfare recipients who are often living better than the average working class people, just so that a small percentage of them can be living like kings at the expense of society without having to contribute absolutely anything useful to it. The entire mafia will crumble, and they will all lose their privileged lifestyles. And so these welfare shills, who may present themselves as either liberals, conservatives, independents, whatever, who themselves criticize government more than us, when we say the same thing, suddenly these big government critics become government defenders. They will tell us, well, everybody wants to come to America. You don't like it, here, leave. How many times they told me that before they would ban me from their so-called independent forums. But with all due respect, I already left Soviet Union looking for my freedom. It's not that easy to adjust moving around. I'm not a millionaire to be able to travel around to look for a perfect system. If they don't understand that, maybe it's their time to leave. Go explore, go liberate some more freedoms for people in Antarctica or someplace, instead of just blessing the dead troops to appear more patriotic. And they will say, well, America has the most freedoms. Look at how corrupt other nations are, you ungrateful immigrant. My friends, just because there are nations even more corrupt than America, just because people from all over the world want to come to America, does not make us a free nation. A Santa Claus of the world, giving away all this free money to all these other regimes and people who come here who happen to be of certain affiliation, maybe. A policeman of the world, with all its military bases all around the world, dictating how democracies must be run. Certainly. But not a free nation. In a free nation, those of us who are able and willing to work should have total freedom, total independence. We should not ever have to worry about any bills. We should be able to travel around the world at least half of the time if we want, and still have plenty of money left over to help those we love and care about, and to donate to charity, if there's any legitimate charity. We should not need any substance abuse, overeating, or overdrinking to feel fulfilled with our lives. Young people should not even have to think about suicides as so many do. Old people should never have to go through the hassle of bureaucracy to obtain their prescriptions or medications, as so many do. And millions of people who are on public assistance because they cannot find jobs that would pay them enough so they could pay their own bills without actually going broke. If government would simply give them back a fraction of land that was stolen from them or their ancestors by way of taxation to supposedly help the poor, and stop harassing businesses with all kinds of legalized extortion scams, forcing these businesses to raise prices on everything, then these governments created poor would not need any assistance. Free nation. We can only look free next to nations like North Korea or Talibanistan, which were created so that we have something even uglier to look down to condition us to accept this misery. It has become normal. Watching this never-ending blame game circus on the establishment media, no matter where in the world you are. Chinese versus capitalists, Americans versus communists, Democrats versus Republicans, pro-maskers versus anti-vaskers, whatever, as a justification for why things are not so great under their rule. Redirecting hatred towards our neighbors, our classmates, our workmates, towards each other within society. All initiated, make no mistake about it, not by ordinary people, but on a daily basis, from the very top, by the establishment media, which at the same time, as I mentioned, keeps blocking people on social media to protect us from hating each other. We all understand that we must fix the broken system. We must rally behind the right cause, get on the right bus, so to speak. If we step on the wrong bus, it may appear that we are not even on any stupid bus, we are being independent and free when no one is bossing you around. But they will spin you around and around. You must read this. You must learn that. Let's go protest here. Counter demonstrate there. Subscribe to this. Donate to that. Then when nothing happens, transfer to another bus. Attend this rally. Sign that petition. Expose this politician. Help us support that politician. You know what? You need some more education to get a better job. Here, take this new medication. Listen to this song. It has a great message. And other than some new celebrity in the cockpit, it gets us absolutely nowhere. It's always somebody else's fault. Stupid people, what you gonna do? And we can all look good criticizing others. I can go on for days telling you how bad things are to make myself look better. But you can identify this movement's legitimacy by its two key objectives. Number one, introduce against vote option in all elections. Our main stated objective. We know that societies where people can select their own representatives have been more successful than dictatorships. However, in our so-called republics or democracies around the world, especially with the merging of cyberspace, while people who are fooled by politicians have a voice in elections, they can vote for them. People who are not fooled by politicians do not have any voice. They cannot vote against them. All the existing dictatorships or establishments need to do to remain in power, if they feel they wore out their welcome, is introduce their own trusted members as opposition and accuse any real opposition that's becoming too successful of being extremist or whatever as an excuse to silence them on the media, which of course they claim they do not control. With against vote option implemented, however, these existing oligarchies will no longer be able to rig our elections because it will give a voice to all the people who do not trust any candidates that are being artificially shoved onto society with the use of money and media propaganda. Their money and media propaganda, positive or negative, will no longer have any effect on election outcome because if a candidate that was allowed to showcase all over television, perhaps acting like he's grassroots, like television doesn't like him, all over social media with the sponsored ads, acting like an outsider, receives, for example, let's say 50 million for votes from people to whom he may have promised, whether it's more money to military families, to the police, the people with guns, or people who give up guns, $1,000 a month for everyone, a free chocolate cake, whatever, but also gets 100 million against votes from people who do not wish to give out any such free handouts. Then, candidates who are truly independent, if they have something better to offer, even if they do not have a penny to their name, will be able to win. Candidates who may represent society which is for the most part not in the mood to give money to politicians to make political contributions will be able to win. Candidates who may not appeal to establishment and their media due to their lack of controversy and idiocy and therefore lack of opportunity for these hypocrites in the media to look good themselves by criticizing them and actually doing them a favor, making them famous that way. But candidates who, due to some good ideas or good leadership, with or without any assistance of the establishment media publicity, manage to get, for example, maybe just 1 million for votes if establishment media happens to be in the hands of hypocrites. but even less or the least against votes, since they did not have to promise free this, free that, or some other stupid things to appeal to a portion of society while getting mass exposure, with this what can be best described as a phishing scam. Instead of these televised celebrities, genuine candidates will still mathematically win and will start to systematically win elections. Whenever there's primaries, beginning of elections, any hypocrites who manage to garnish a portion of 4 votes with something idiotic, like by promising people whether it's easy, excellent paying jobs where they can sit on their asses all day, to bomb those suckers and give you cheap oil, or take their oil, or free health massages with happy endings like Hillary Clinton's sidekick Madonna promised. If they get even more against votes, it immediately becomes clear that they can go home with their promises. They're not wanted as public servants. And if they manage to sneak through into the next round, because maybe locally not enough people were paying attention, they will only embarrass themselves later, in the main elections, where people will be paying attention, as will the media outlets who chose to introduce them and stay obsessed with them. This will change absolutely everything in our lives, in our world. It will get rid of entire political mafia like a cockroach infestation. It will allow people in the government who want to serve their communities rather than special interests do their jobs. Because one big league candidate, no matter how much he loves America first or his nation first, as we witnessed over and over again, in the end cannot change absolutely anything, other than help some new genius like Joe Biden win their popularity contests, by hook or by crook. And if Donald Trump's side is claiming that the media lied about how many votes Joe Biden got, as I mentioned earlier, we should allow possibility that both sides lied, that they all constantly lie and are allowed to get away lying just so their entire unpopular political circus looks more legitimate than it actually is. Because I would conduct multiple choice polls on political forums before I would get banned, which is I know exactly why I would get banned. And I know that's exactly why YouTube and Facebook no longer even display dislikes, downvotes. I would conduct these polls where I would select a few of the most popular political celebrities at the time on their news media, their top presidential candidates such as John McCain, Herman Cain, Macron, Obama, Bush, Clinton, whatever. Whoever was the most popular at the time according to the news media. And I would have for as well as against vote option for each one. It would be multiple choice poll. And every single time, all of these top contenders, according to the news media, would end up way in the negative. 70, 80, 90% or more would always vote against them, which reveals a very serious glitch in their so-called republic or democracy, whatever they want to call it, that not just one candidate to one side, but that the entire news media, even from other parts of the world, for whatever reason, is being systematically obsessed with candidates that majority of Americans do not even want to see. If we can use our own personal logic, rather than accepting demented reality of the news media, this is a deception of epic proportions. It demonstrates that if the people are ignorant, they are not ignorant by choice. An against vote option will turn it all around. Number 2, our second main stated objective, just as important, restore freedom of speech. Launch an official public forum. Giant networks like CNN and Fox News taking turns telling us how evil the president is not freedom of speech. Friends telling to each other how corrupt the system is not freedom of speech. We used to do that in Soviet Union. And with all due respect to my American friends, I love my life in America, but I would have never been excited to come to the United States in 1987 to invest my life here, learn the language and all, if I would have knew that I would keep getting banned from all political forums for expressing my political ideas. I would have much rather been eager to immigrate to a place like Iraq, Libya, or Syria. They were nice countries back then. In our modern world, in the age of cyberspace, blocking a person from social media is equivalent to murdering him, to cutting out his tongue. Some people live so they can talk. How can it be that in the capital of freedom of speech, in the United States, social media owners, who first of all owe their very existence to taxpayer-funded public sector, putting up satellites in the sky, inventing the internet, when these social media geniuses who usurp this technology by bribing politicians can keep banning people left and right, even the Twitter-in-chief, the supposedly elected leader of a nation, and remain relevant. Now, as I believe I documented clearly a few minutes ago, banning Trump at the end of the 4-year season was just part of the Circus Act, to give other, even bigger news outlets an excuse to announce it, to say, oh, look, he's the one that's oppressed, he must be an outsider, to make him more appealing to millions of people like myself who actually have been silenced on cyberspace, to possibly prepare him for 2024. You can call it my opinion. Anyone can claim that their voice is oppressed. But it shouldn't have to be a guessing game whose voice is really oppressed. To end this hypocrisy, our elected representatives must launch an official public forum which is not controlled by any private corporations nor some imbecile and cannot ban people for any reason. A forum which will exist indefinitely, allowing people to stay connected, to organize politically without interruption, without establishment media manipulation. To combat hate groups from organizing on these forums. And I already addressed hate mongering earlier. Naturally, people are not interested in hate. And what may seem like hate speech to some is often simple truth about someone else to others. It's for people to decide. To combat hate groups from organizing on these forums, individuals will be allowed to set their own settings, what we want to see, what we do not want to see, what kind of language, who, if anyone, we ourselves want to block, and prevent idiots from setting up multiple accounts to prevent spamming. To prevent these pushy salespeople, that's what these hate mongers are, they're pushy salespeople. To prevent these pushy salespeople from bothering us from under different identities, so that if we block them, they and any hate groups or scams they create no longer show up on our feed, like these annoying politicians. That's it. One individual, one account. No multiple passports, no multiple IDs, no multiple accounts. Those who need to use multiple accounts or secret names or be censored can continue using private forums. According to CNN, Donald Trump will soon launch such a forum. Watch out! Maybe already has. Who cares? But when our elected representatives will launch such an official public forum, and not some intentionally lame, functioning at the same speed as is given to these private corporations, a forum where our friends' posts cannot just be deleted or subdivided with some idiotic degrading spamming, or advertisements as they call them, then we will see how many people will still be interested to continue using these primitive, billionaire, imbecile, genius-run platforms such as Facebook or Twitter. And Donald Trump, the Tweety bird, if he was not an imposter, as I documented, could have done this while he was president, instead of creating some Space Force programs while millions of activists like myself kept getting banned. So how can we pass these two acts? Obviously, writing letters to our senators and congressmen is not going to work. They can be persuaded to pass a raise for themselves or to redistribute some wealth, but not to jeopardize their own careers. In the capital of the free world, the United States, we need to elect at least 300 truly independent congressmen, at least 75 senators, and the president, for the sole purpose to pass these two acts. To average sheep, this sounds like lunacy. Apparently, to get one candidate elected for Senate, it takes millions of dollars and tremendous amount of effort. How much more for 300 congressmen, 100 senators, plus a president? Impossible. But if we stop thinking like sheep and use our own personal logic, because logic is all humanity has left in our fight against insanity. Logic and leadership of ordinary people who can see better than the average sheep. Logically, we do not need to do what they've been doing on the establishment media circus, financed by money. We can publicize the entire movement as one entity. Only where can we publicize it? Elites control cyberspace. They manipulate it. And if this video will start to go viral, you can be absolutely certain they will block it. They will find something unpatriotic, racist, or hateful in this message of peace. We cannot count on cyberspace too much, and I have to admit, It took me a lot of effort to put together this message, especially for someone who sincerely being uncertain if I will be able to reach out to anyone. Other than perhaps my girlfriend or my mother, both of whom kept telling me to stop this nonsense, to stop politics. Only what I've heard from successful people, and a little voice inside my head kept telling me that if you believe in something enough, you can do it. So I kept trying. But 25 years is a long time. And I do also have to keep my promise to my girl to stop politics. I did enough. So for all the effort that I put in, I don't think it's too much to ask you to download this video so that if it gets deleted on my end, you can at least continue sharing it with your friends in private. There's nothing incriminating, nothing embarrassing about this message of peace, and it's what most people in the world want. But we cannot rely on cyberspace too much. We must be courageous enough to also scribble the name of the movement and place it as a yard sign or a bumper sticker. The name I chose, newworldgovernment.net, may sound extremely uncool, extremely unpatriotic. But let us examine patriotism in our modern world. And I don't remember ever criticizing Adolf Hitler. But imagine if America was in decline and some superpower that wanted to completely destroy us would start backing something like Black Lives Matter with weapons and everything, would start to encourage them to fight for their own nation within America, to not be cowards, to liberate themselves once and for all from the offspring of former slave owners. After all, they have their own culture, their own language, they speak Ebonics, not some English. If you think this is far-fetched, this is exactly what's happening in Ukraine today. I've been to Ukraine in 1985. It was unimaginable that something like this could be happening there. And I don't think it's in the interest of any true patriot to see that happening in their country. So hypocrisy lies with the ignorance of these wannabe heroes, not with newworldgovernment.net. Global oligarchy, which rules by division, may have us convinced that, depending where we live, fighting for Sleepy Joe or Uncle Sam is patriotic. Or fighting for Mother Russia to defeat Nazis is patriotic. These Russian fighters are so brave, so tough. They allow all these old-timer mafia guys on YouTube now to tell their mafia stories from the past. And they call each other tough guys. And they have followers commenting below their videos, even some from law enforcement, calling them tough guys. For example, there was some fat degenerate Roy the Mayonnaise, a mass murderer, who they sometimes refer to as a very tough guy. Let's get real. Catch him without a weapon, put a stick between his fat legs, and he would fall down. Whack him over the head with a stick one more time while he's down, if necessary, and this sack of crap is finished. Tough guy. I'm not the one that's trying to sound tough, but if I would have knew, I believe if any man would have knew back then when these sleazeballs were active who exactly they were, any computer geek who just escaped from his mother's basement and wanted some excitement could have just as easily put a gun to the head of any of these bravehearts, and they'd instantly forget that they're tough guys. Made men, soldiers, lions, nosocostrons, psychopaths, whatever. There's a huge difference between being tough and being a lowlife. Murdering someone when they're off guard and getting away with stuff because they have political protection. These thugs with political protection are usually emboldened. They can act tough. While ordinary people, who are often hounded for even the smallest things, like a broken taillight or expired registration, we are like sheep. Yes, we try to avoid confrontation. But if you by some chance consider yourself to be not a sheep, my friend, have decency to acknowledge that being not a sheep does not mean saying things like government sucks, F the president, let's go Brandon, until some Democrat named Brandon gets elected. We all support the system just the same, just by paying tax on a burger or a tomato. Being not a sheep means having a vision bigger than the average sheep, not just for personal gain, not just for personal family. Having an absolute determination and not being afraid to look weird or different when you know you're right. And I explain why this is right, against anything else, including any other truth-tellers who tell us the truth just so they can tell us their name. Establishment, which keeps trying to hijack our movement of unity. has created a notion among society, especially among these sheep who follow their circus, who think they're not sheep, that a new world government would somehow benefit the elites. No matter what degenerate country they live in, they've been taught to believe that even though they have problems, they're the best, they have it best, better than anyone else in the world. No matter how corrupt their system, how corrupt their leaders, they have to protect their principles and their values. They would never unite with these other losers. That's their mentality. So if you would scribble newworldgovernment.net as a yard sign or bumper sticker, it may annoy the hell out of them. And they may try to intimidate you in the beginning if you're the only one. It takes guts to do that. That is courage. That is heroism. Unlike with these yard signs they post for some latest TV celebrity because it was presented to them as an outsider. Unlike with these politicians who talk tough against communism from within safety of America, rather than actually from within a communist country, like for example my father did. Or if you feel too uncomfortable to put newworldgovernment.net yard sign, it's okay. You can also put, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, not trying to be funny here, just hear me out. You can also put newworldgovernment.net sucks. Newworldgovernment.net is evil, or down with newworldgovernment.net. It will be just as effective, maybe even more effective to get the message out if your neighbors happen to think that you're stupid. As I documented, this is exactly how the establishment, understanding that it is not trusted by society, keeps introducing and promoting its own trusted members. Pro or against, it really doesn't matter. You can put Donald Duck or Mr. Bean, 2024, as long as you also put newworldgovernment.net beside it clearly visible. The idea is to unite outside cyberspace, which they can manipulate. When these mafia roaches will start seeing our yard signs and bumper stickers popping up all over the place, their entire political welfare cult will either pretend that they were on our side all along or go silent. Unlike in cyberspace, which they can manipulate, they will not be able to do absolutely anything about it because they are not tough. They are not fighters, and they do not control military. They manipulate military. Big difference. And their mercenaries, or the top generals, if elites will try to give them orders to interfere, to fight against our justified universal cause, instead of some usual idiotic divisive drivel which they themselves often initiate to control opposition, these mercenaries will instead turn on them. And they do not have aliens backing them. They will not be able to nuke the world and go live in their underground tunnels like they show us in their movies. One of their hidden scare tactics. In their movies, in cyberspace, they're invincible. And we do not have to fear poor people in other nations gaining the same freedoms, or criminals from other nations coming here to steal from us. All we have to do to prevent that is stop giving away free handouts. What we do need to be concerned with is criminals in power, harboring criminals in society, which they keep doing all over the world, just so they can have backing and turn us against each other when they are threatened with some nationalist movement. For example, with this conflict in Ukraine, they can blame each other all they want, but after they toppled the so-called democratically or undemocratically elected Russian puppet, they had 8 years to install a real democracy, if that's what they wanted. But instead, they installed some new puppet regime that was friendly to them, that was making payments to Vice President Joe Biden's son Hunter Biden, among other members of the mafia. What more needs to be said? And so to those who supported America's efforts to liberate Afghanistan, what can they tell us that after decades of effort, trillions of dollars spent, all the lives lost, as soon as American troops left, their government crumbled? So now they will try to tell us, like I know my mother was trying to tell me, well, the people there are very ignorant, they still have caveman mentality there. No, they should instead ask themselves how would they like it if Russians or Chinese would decide to bring them their freedom. They wouldn't like it very much. Newworldgovernment.net, on the other hand, will be able to eliminate crime and poverty in the entire world because it will have people's backing and authority to do so. Any so-called national coalitions, state coalitions, city, block, household, or toilet coalitions, any so-called independent governments who, by the way, always seem desperately dependent for handouts from international bankers in order to exist. Let them try to object to our cause, the two objectives this movement stands for. They will only bury themselves. They can only look good in front of their followers by comparing themselves with other players within their global political idiot circus. Next to each other, pointing out each other's flaws and hypocrisy in between handshakes and hugs, they can look good. But next to what this movement stands for, they cannot look good. It ruins the entire good cop, bad cop circus. Us, they can only ignore, keep blocking, and pretend that we do not exist. So do not ignore this. That's how we rebel against the system, which preys on humanity's division.